Well, joining us via Skype from San Antonio is Mark Dankof. He's a former U.S. Senate candidate. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, sir. Now, the Republican Jewish coalition has said that Ron Paul is, quote, far outside of the mainstream of the Republican Party. How much of that has to do with his stance on Israel, in your opinion?
I think it has everything to do with his stance on Israel. And this is just another version of what happened to Pat Buchanan in the Republican Party in 1992 and 1996. Buchanan was the one presidential candidate with significant political timber and financial backing in the Republican Party in those days, who was consistently critical of the Israeli lobby. He was talking about the Pollard spy case, the USS Liberty attack on Israel in 1967, and the way in which this American-Israeli relationship is costing Americans billions of dollars and a lot of goodwill abroad, and is directly involved in the whole overextension of the American military empire in the Middle East and in Central Asia in a way that's a complete loser. Paul is not necessarily as brass-knuckled as Buchanan is on this issue, but nonetheless, Paul has been a consistent critic of Israel. He wants to end foreign aid to Israel, and he has recently been talking about how it is that Israel is trying to get the United States to become involved in a proxy military war against Iran. He's the only Republican warning the public about this, and this is why the Republican Jewish coalition has banned him.
Right. Now, the mainstream media has largely shunned him, but those looking for an alternative voice in American politics have taken notice of Ron Paul. What do you make of his quote-unquote misguided and extreme views, as the coalition has called them, overall, not just on Israel?
Well, I think when you understand the Zionist lobby, it's not simply a question of the fact that they want a complete, absolute American military support for Israel and political support for Israel under any and all circumstances. But Zionism is all about a domestic Jewish lobby in the United States that consistently favors overall policies that are well left of center. They tend to favor big government. They tend to favor gay rights. They tend to favor abortion on demand. They tend to favor an expansion of the welfare state in this country, at the same time that they have been very supportive of a lot of these actions that have been taken in the last 10 or 11 years to demonize loyal Americans who are critical of Israel. They tend to be supporters of the USA Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act of 2006, and all of these other things that have been happening domestically in the U.S. that have been curtailing people's constitutional rights and that have been threatening the Bill of Rights. Ron Paul is the one voice in the Republican presidential primaries and the Republican presidential process who's been talking about these issues at all, and that's why he has been receiving the vitriol, as it were, of the Israeli lobby, although not nearly as much as Pat Buchanan did in the 1990s. If Paul should be successful early on in a couple of primaries and in a couple of caucuses, and I think the shrill voices in the Israeli-controlled American media will begin to become more aggressive in attacking him.
So in that case, considering Paul is polling around second in Iowa and is being considered a very serious contender by many, will the Zionist lobby let him win?
The answer is no. Go back and look at what happened with Pat Buchanan in 1996. After he won the New Hampshire primary, the next thing you knew, the Zionist-controlled neoconservative press with Bill Buckley's National Review and Bill Kristol's Weekly Standard began to attack Buchanan and began to engage in all kinds of acts of what I consider to be character assassination against him and a total demonization of his views. And at the same time, just in lockstep, Time, Newsweek, and U.S. News and World Report jumped on this thing with Pat Buchanan and were accusing him of being a racist and an anti-Semite. They were talking about how he was an extremist and he was divisive and he was a know-nothing and he was a jingoist, when in fact Pat Buchanan was not only a very clear and principled critic of Israel, but Buchanan was critical of the larger globalist movement that has taken over world economies, that is controlled through international central banking, and that is destroying not simply the economy of the United States for the average worker, but is harming people around the world. Buchanan was the one Republican talking about these things after he won the New Hampshire primary, after he won the Louisiana caucus. Then they started coming after him full bore. If Ron Paul does well early, the same thing will happen.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. That was Mark Dankof, former U.S. Senate candidate, joining us on the line from San Antonio. Mr. Dankof, as always, many thanks indeed for your insight here on Press TV.